So, so I know you could kind of visually see there's not a lot of text here around Tom and his picture. There could be like volumes of text around Tom and his picture. Tom has done a tremendous amount of work and has a tremendous amount of experience. Um, I know I get my LinkedIn mails periodically, and almost every time there's something from Tom that he commented on something or posted something out. Um, Plus, he works a full-time job too. So it isn't just his job to do that kind of stuff. So we're very fortunate tonight to have Tom Henriksen. Our topic tonight is Power Skills Bootcamp, specifically looking at teamwork for BAs. Um, he's been in many roles over the past 20 years, but you probably have like 100 years of experience. And instead of me going on and on, I'll just turn it over to Tom if you want to introduce yourself and get into your slides.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my slides, hopefully? Awesome. Awesome. Well, great to be with you. So, as you guys heard, we're going to talk a little bit about teamwork tonight. And teamwork can be something, this is kind of one of these topics that can be kind of vague, right? We hear leaders talk about it without specifics. Sometimes you hear people talk about teamwork. You're like, what do we mean here? So, whether you're working in a large team or a small team, there can be challenges with teamwork. I'm sure we've all dealt with people on our teams. Maybe you have people now on your team, but as a business analyst, you can find yourself on teams with a lot of other roles. Project managers, scrum masters, developers, people like me, probably cause you a lot of problems, quality assurance, and many more. So we each need to play our role for the sake of the team. Each organization can have its unique challenges, but strong teamwork is required everywhere. Quote, teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments toward organizational objectives. It is the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results, unquote. Andrew Carnegie. Now, the common vision is a great place to start. A lot of people like to talk about that. Teams need to head in the same direction. I would think you would agree. But do you ever feel like some of your teammates are heading in different directions? So, welcome to Power Skills Bootcamp Teamwork for Business Analysts. So, let's get started. My name is Tom Henriksen. I'm a software developer with many years of experience. I've also been a project manager, scrum master, and a manager of software development. I'm an entrepreneur. I've hosted online Agile and DevOps events. I've written a few books, and I blog and speak to many organizations. I currently work for Blue Cross of North Carolina and do speaking and writing for my company, Code is Easy. So here's our agenda for today. First, we're going to start out discussing and defining teamwork and what a good team player is. Next, we'll discuss influence as it relates to teams. Third, credibility. I will share a simple acronym that will help you with that. Some of you may have heard this before. It's from a book that's been around for many years. Fourth, setting team norms can build great teams. We will review a few steps from a Harvard Business Review article that will talk about that and show us how to do that. And then finally, we're going to share a few items on fostering collaboration. Let's get started and get to know each other a little better. Feel free to share in the chat, waffles or pancakes. What would you guys choose? I know it's about dinner time for you guys, so maybe you guys are having breakfast for dinner. So early votes are looking for waffles, I guess. So we got a few with pancakes. Okay. Well, pancakes is picking up. Very good. Very good. Now, my son calls waffles awfuls, so you kind of know how he feels about the whole thing. But yeah, I'll eat either one, So looks like a lot of pancakes, so that's good. Would you like to live in the Arctic or the Sahara Desert? So living in California, I would think you guys would probably prefer the Sahara Desert, but let's see, right? Desert, yep. Arctic, a few people in the Arctic. Bob says Hawaii, yeah. Yeah, that Hawaii's nice. Arctic, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We've been having a hot summer here in Philly or Pennsylvania area, so I might I might like the Arctic. Who knows? Which music band was your favorite growing up? So I had a lot of favorites. Um, but let's see what you guys have to say. What was your favorite band? Pearl Jam, Rush, yeah, In Sync, Def Leppard, Earth, Wind and Fire, yeah, Eagles, New Kids on the Block. Yes, lots of good options there. Very good. Name 5 items you would bring if you were stranded on a desert island. Does anybody have any items they would bring on a if they were stranded on a desert island? Satellite phone. Yeah, that's a good one. Genie lamp, water, food, and an iPhone. Yeah. If you had the iPhone though, Gina, would you get reception? I don't know. Maybe water filter. Yes. Water filter. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Diet Coke, books, sandals, you know, batteries, radio, 100 foot of plastic knife, flares. Yeah. Food, canoe, tent, fishing rod, book, laptop, phone, first aid kit, seeds. Yeah. Have a little garden. Very good. All right. Check out Alone in the History Channel. All right. So, what we're here to talk about, what is teamwork? So, what would you guys say teamwork is? Feel free to put it up in the chat there. What would you say teamwork means to you? Because as business analysts, like we talked about, you guys are kind of the linchpin of the team, really, when you think about it. You have a big responsibility to bring, crazy people like me. I'm a developer, or most of my career, I've been a developer. You got to try to get us in line, right? You have project managers to deal with. So, what would you say? Yeah, Heather says working towards a common goal. Yeah. What else? Anybody else have definitions? Herding cats? Yes, Trish, herding cats. That feels like that sometimes, I bet for you sometimes. Emotional intelligence, cooperation and collaboration. Yeah, very good, Bob. Yeah, those are important aspects, right? Of making teamwork. Anybody else? What do they think teamwork is? Synergy. Yep. A collection of diverse people with different experiences working to meet a goal. Very good. Collab towards a common goal. Yeah. So a lot of talk about common goals, something that makes the dream work. Yeah, Tira. So you guys have shared a lot, and that's great. But let's ask our friends at Merriam-Webster. So, according to Merriam-Webster, online teamwork is work done by a group acting together so that each member does a part that contributes to the efficiency of the whole. So, how would that compare to what we have here? So, it seems like you guys talked a lot about similar things. So, there in this definition here, we can see, working together. You guys all talked about that. Like Gina said, collaborating towards a common goal. A lot of people talked about that. Synergy, collection of diverse people, Lauren has a nice definition there, but brings it back to that common goal. So I think that's really good. But Trish, I do like the herding cats. That's a good one as well. Working together towards a common goal. Yeah. So you guys, I think you hit on it quite well. So what is a good team player? So I want you guys to hold. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but can we do a breakout room here at this point? Is that feasible? I think we had talked about that, but if not, we can roll with it. Is that okay?
I
I don't know
can
if we have
do.
that capability, do we, Steve?
We do, yeah. So how many
If you want to
breakout
do
rooms
like,
you want?
let's see how many we got. Can you do like
18.
three
Yep.
or four in a room,
Yep.
and then just randomly assign? I think Zoom will allow that. And
Yep.
we'll do it for 5 minutes, and everybody can just kind of think about what is a good team player. Does that work?
Yep.
All right.
Here we go. Let's see, open.
So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Talk to your teammates. What is a good team player? Come up with a few options.
There we go. Everybody's in a room.
Awesome.
That's the
Very
first
good.
time doing a Zoom breakout room.
Oh, really? Yeah.
When I logged in at 5, nobody was there. I started just playing around with all the
Playing around
options.
with it.
So
Yeah. It's not too hard. I know. So tomorrow I'm presenting to a group, but they use Teams, and I think
yeah.
it's similar. But yeah, it's helpful just to kind of give people a little chance to talk amongst themselves, and they don't want to hear me talk the whole time. So that I don't blame them.
Yes. Well, Teams has a lot more options, which makes it
Does it? Yep.
can make it more difficult.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, when you get more options, more choices, it's kind of confusing. So we're getting a little rain here. We've had rain hitting our window here. It's been really dry here. Our lawns are pretty burned. So, but it's probably normally pretty dry in Sacramento though, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got so much rain though in the winter, the
Oh, did
last
you?
couple. So the
Mhm.
drought, we're out of the drought. All the
Mhm.
lakes that were almost empty are now totally full.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
But the last few weeks have been hot,
Have they
like
unseasonably,
112.
or that's a little hotter than normal for you guys, right?
Yeah,
112.
usually around 100, 105
Yep.
for an extended period of time is normal, but we've been
Mhm.
up to 113, 114
Whoa.
for a few
Wow.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my sister-in-law, she lives in Phoenix or Scottsdale, and it's like 120 there, but that's like, yeah, that's a little a little hot for me. But so are you a native for California, Steve, or are you
Yeah.
transplant?
Nope.
Native? Okay.
Born and
Yep.
raised.
Okay.
Except
So
for
you're
two
used to it.
years.
Yep.
Yes, 2 years when I was 2 years old.
Mhm.
We lived in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, that's what I grew up in Iowa, and I've been in Pennsylvania for almost 6 years now. So,
Hmm.
but it's it's been enjoyable. Can't complain. So,
Yeah.
have you always lived in Sacramento?
No, I've lived all over.
Mm-hmm.
We moved every like 3 or 4 years growing up,
Mm-hmm.
just
Yep.
because my dad's he worked
Is he?
for Liberty Mutual,
Ah.
and as he was working his way up the ladder, he just kept
Mm-hmm.
moving him around. So
Yep. Yep.
most of my time in Southern California,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been up here now for 30, 40 years almost.
Yep. 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 Is it quite a bit different than living in Southern California?
It is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as crowded.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get the Santa Ana winds
Yep.
up here, which is
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember going out to LA a long time ago, and I remember people talking about that, and at first I didn't realize how bad that was until some people were telling us about how bad the Santa Ana winds can be. And so,
I forgot to keep track of the time, so I'm giving them 1 more minute.
sure. Yep. Yeah, I think
Broadcast, I can,
that's about right.
yeah.
Did when you do the breakout rooms, does it let you set a timer?
And I didn't notice,
Okay.
but
I couldn't remember. It's been a
the
while
only
since I
options
did.
I had were automatically assign people, or I
Mm-hmm.
could pick people, or they could pick a room.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, I think bring them back whenever, and we'll do a little debrief and
Cool.
keep moving on.
All right, let's Do this, close all rooms.
Yeah, it looks like a few people are filtering back.
Cool.
Here they come. Coming on back.
All breakout rooms will close in 45 seconds.
All right. They're coming back slowly but surely.
Looks like
Looks like
room
they're-
2 is deep in conversation because none of them have left.
Yep.
Bob's in that room, by the way.
We're blaming Bob, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny.
All right, 15 seconds and they'll get kicked out.
All right. So when everybody's back, we'll do a little debrief here. See what you guys came up with. All right. Looks
All
like
right, yeah,
we're
we're
all
good.
back. All right. Excellent. Well, hopefully you guys all had a good discussion in your breakout rooms. So if people would like to, maybe one person would like to share in the chat, or if people want to come off mute, I'm game with that too, to share kind of what you came up with. What is a good team player? Feel free, if you, like I said, if you want to put it in the chat, if you want to come off mute, one person wants to come off mute from the room, or a couple, I guess it's no big deal. You don't have a help each other in achieving a common goal. Very good. Yeah. Go
I
ahead,
can
Miss
go
Amy.
first.
Sure, go.
I was on the team with Bob, Trisha, and Javier. Hopefully I said that right. And so we came up with, people that want to model the behavior, people that volunteer and, actively provide their feedback towards, in collaboration. Bob specifically mentioned good attitude, good aptitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Trish mentioned taking ownership and working towards a greater good goal. She's the one that mentioned like modeling the good teamwork, open to learn and ask for help, and no accusing, no pointing fingers if there's something that kind of is brought up that's negative. I wrote, just being engaged in collaboration, willing to provide that feedback and input. And Javier wrote, willing to receive help, feedback openly. And so that was ours.
Very good. Thank you, Gina. I appreciate you you took some good notes there and shared a lot about each person's contribution. So thank you so much for that. Does anybody else want to share? I know it looks like somebody put in the chat, help each other in achieving the common goal. So thanks for sharing that. Like I said, feel free if somebody wants to come off mute and share, or put it in the chat, whatever you guys are comfortable with. I know at this point in the day, maybe you're tired of talking to people. I don't know. Feel free. Does anybody else want to share? Our group, we talked about someone who pulls their weight. Yeah. Tara says, yeah, that's important, isn't it? To have someone who pulls their weight and isn't maybe coasting might be a word some people might use. I saw Adonis, you came off mute. Did you want to say something? No, I in team. That's right. That's right. All right. So nobody wants to come off mute. That's fine. That is fine. All right. So you guys came up with some good ideas. I really appreciate Gina from sharing, and a couple of you shared in the chat about teamwork and about pulling their own weight. The work, it's the work and teamwork. Yes. So I want to move on to the next thing here to kind of talk about this. So this is a book. Some of you guys, you've probably heard of Patrick Lencioni. He's written a lot of books. So this is one of his books, The Ideal Team Player. You've probably heard of the 5 dysfunctions of the team. I think that's his most popular book. But in his book, The Ideal Team Player, this is his quote: "The right people are the ones who have the 3 virtues." And we'll talk a little bit about this in common. So humility, hunger, and people smarts. So, and when he says people smarts, and I think, Bob, you put this in the chat earlier, you put emotional intelligence. I believe I'm just kind of scrolling through the chat here, but Yeah, so that's kind of what he's talking about, people smarts, kind of understanding, being able to read people. He talks about humility. And I think you guys kind of touched on that a little bit in some of those explanations. Like Gina, I think some of the things you talked about were kind of relating to humility, people engaging, collaborative. And I think that's an important thing. And then he talks about hunger too. And what he means there really is hunger is somebody who's willing to put in the work. And as Tara, you put in there, it's the work and teamwork, right? And then you also mentioned too, someone who pulls their own weight. So I think those are kind of, he touches on some things, uses a few different words there, but I think you guys kind of really pull out this similar, like he calls them virtues, but similar themes, I guess if I would say, when we talk about ideal team players. So I think those are important aspects. But I think where you guys had kind of touched on that, but I just want to pause and see if anybody has any questions at this point, because we've kind of talked a little bit about teams and teamwork and what is a team player. Just want to pause and see if there's any questions. And as we go through, feel free, if you do have a question, put it in the chat or come off mute. This is a very informal presentation, so feel free to, I just want to stop and pause if anybody has any questions. All right, excellent. So we talked about these three. Be good to address the challenge of, yeah, Bob, that's a good question. Virtual teams. So Bob, you bring up that point. I want to kind of follow that up with another question. What are there specific things that you see in a challenge in virtual teams? I'm guessing there might be something behind that. Is there specific things that maybe you see is a challenge for virtual teams? I can think of a few, but I want to make sure we address that. So Tara
I'm
asks,
sorry, Tom. I was multitasking. Could you say that again? That's just an example.
Yes. That's really tough, isn't it? It's funny. So I do some blogging and writing, and I actually have a blog post where I talk a little bit about that. But I feel this is how I explained it. I said, it's kind of like we all are doing two things or multitasking, right? That we're all like, so I'm a developer, so I might be working on my development stuff. But like today we had our planning, right? So I feel like everybody's like doing this, but then like they're kind of perking up. Somebody said my name, and then like you mentioned, Bob. So yeah, I think that's part of the thing too, is we try to do a lot at once. I think I'm guilty of it as we all can be. But yeah, it's hard to get, and I suppose this is probably what you're referring to, Bob, that it's hard to get people's attention, isn't it? To say,
Yes.
okay, I want Tom or whoever to listen, and so we can fully engage. And that's a thing. I think it's really tough. And I think one of the things I see, especially we have big meetings where you have a lot of people there, and and then everybody has all these demands. It's kind of hard for us to get people's attention. So have you seen anything, Bob, that's been helpful? Is there some things you've tried, or maybe other people have ideas?
If the team is new, that's one thing. But if you're familiar with the people that are in the meeting,
Yeah.
sometimes you have to look at what you know about those folks and try and head it off at the pass if you could.
Yep.
So some people maybe need to be informed that they're going to be, involved in the conversation.
Yes. Very good.
So
Very
I
good.
think, maybe just a little bit of planning, and we do talk about when we're doing requirements, and just project work in general, is stakeholder analysis. I think sometimes we kind of let that go, or we're just too busy to figure it out. But to make the best use of everyone's time, sometimes you got to think ahead of the meeting about, what the challenges might be.
Very good. Very good, Bob. Yeah, I like that. And what I want to say is, so as a developer, a lot of times we can be very introverted. Not saying we're all are, but and I've talked about this, and I don't know I'm trying to remember when I presented to you guys last time if we covered this, but like I had a teammate, I remember, and I was actually a manager of the team. And one of the things, to your point, Bob, is if his name was Eric, if Eric needed to, talk about something in the meeting, and if we were able to like kind of prime him, say, hey, Eric, we're going to talk about this part, then he was able to like talk about it. But if you just, said, hey, like drop, you know how people do the drive-by back when we were in offices, say,
Yeah.
hey, Eric, I got a question about, you know, that was for him, that would be like he needed the questions, he needed time to process it, you know? But that's to your point, Bob, that's a tough one, but yeah, it's hard to get people's attention, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we're kind of experiencing a little bit at work is we have a challenging stakeholder who's part of a team. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're all going towards this common goal of delivering a product within a cycle, and but one of the people who are involved, they the way they speak, their tone, and they may not be aware of it,
Mm,
but is really sometimes condescending. So
yes. Yep.
you know, it's dealing with, I guess, as part of that is dealing with those challenging team players so that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, next time maybe it won't happen.
Yeah. 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 Their tone or maybe their face might say, you know, they're kind of mad or yeah, they're tense. So
Yeah.
that's a good point. So what else? Yeah. So Tara asks, as a developer, what is your version of a team player from a business analyst? So I think what I would just say, Tara, is, you know, a lot of things we've talked about is really somebody who can kind of read, you know, like kind of to that people smarts. Like I talked about, some of us developers, we can be a little introverted, you know, we can be a little kind of like Bob was mentioning there. Sometimes we can be difficult to work with, but I think that's the thing where, you know, it's important to read people, and I'm sure, like you guys know, as business analysts, especially the different stakeholders you have to deal with, you know, that can be people at a high level, they can be, you know, at different, you know, different expertise. So I think that's one of the things too. Um, Also with the, you know, just kind of understanding the audience. I think that's something, I'll be honest, as a developer, I think we do poorly as developers a lot of times, is understanding, okay, I'm talking to a business analyst or a manager, or I'm talking to a business executive. You know, we need to change kind of how we approach things, especially when we, you know, and we all do this, right? We all work at companies that have acronyms and things. It can be difficult. So I think that's one of the things, is to understand that. So, but yeah, not having met your teammates in person ever, that can be a struggle. I know, Steve, you were talking about that before. I think so the company I work with, I am virtual, but we do get together a couple times a year. And I think, to kind of to your point, Steve, I think that helps if that's, you know, I know that's not in everybody's budget, but that can be tough. So, all right. So we talked about these. We kind of compared Lencioni's ideas: smart, humble, hungry. And I just want to point out, I'm going to talk about a few more books in this presentation, but one of the last slides is, I call it my recommended reading. It's just the books that I've referenced here. So if you guys are like, because I've, you know, I throw a lot of books into my presentations, and I don't always, somebody smartly said, Tom, you need to put a recommended reading slide in your presentation. So I do have that at the end. So just so if you're wondering, hey, what were you talking about? So influence. So influence is what I call it a core skill. So if you guys have seen I have another presentation called Humans Are Hard, Code is Easy, and I do 3 core soft skills, and influence is a big part of that. So I think it's essential for anyone working on a team. How do we develop influence? Well, we need to first build relationships. So get to know your coworkers. If you know, for instance, they might have a newborn, they might need more time with their growing family, or maybe they need to go to bed early, or, you know, not get up as early or something like that. Maybe they're a little tired. From there, we can begin to build trust and show up consistently and deliver. So in the Steelers locker room, head coach Mike Tomlin has a sign that says, the standard is the standard. So this is a message to each player that they must uphold the level of expectations. So this enables trust amongst the team. So kind of like back to, I think, who said the team or pulling their own weight, I think is what, yeah, Tara, you mentioned that, pulling your own weight. And I think that's essentially what Mike Tomlin is talking about. The standard being the standard is that, you know, when somebody comes in, we've got to uphold the standard of, you know, of your organization, or whether it's a team. So the last item we'll talk about for influence is to develop skills. So as a business analyst, your skills are understanding that, and details can create influence for you. So those are an important aspects. Your team will respect your professional work. And another thing is you can find additional skills to add to your repertoire. For instance, perhaps, and some of you may already do this, but perhaps you can learn how to lead effective meetings. So for instance, if your project manager or a scrum master may be gone, you can step up and help things keep moving. So credibility is an important aspect. So DYSIWYG, if you guys have heard of this, so essentially that means do what you said you would do. So this is from a book, and this is an old book, the Coase and Posner First Law of Leadership. So this is the book called The Leadership Challenge. So I say it's an old book because it was there when I went to college, and I think it was even old at that time. And that was quite a few years ago. So a few of you may have ran into that book. I think it's used in a lot of schools, have it in their curriculum. So, but the Coase and Posner's first law of leadership, if you don't believe your messenger, you won't believe the message. So for instance, if it's a leader or a business analyst like yourself, if you say you're going to do something and you do it, people feel credible and look at you in a different light. Of course, if you don't, then that's a problem. Of course, and I know as a developer, you're probably looking at me thinking, how many times has a developer promised something and not? So, and therefore you probably they lost a little credibility in your eyes, I'm sure. So consistent. So when you show up every day for work on time, that builds trust. Punctual people help show up early and don't skip a day or break the streak. That consistency counts. So clear communication. If you've listened to a politician, they can say a lot, right? Of course, you may wonder what they think because nothing is clear. So be clear in your communication, use short sentences, and don't use overly wordy prose. So be transparent, let people know what you are going to do, share what you have done, and if they are guessing what you're up to, they might be confused. So seek feedback, always be open to feedback. Now consider it, then perhaps you can act on it. Now understand, of course, not all feedback is to be used, right? There's sometimes, somebody's just mad or it doesn't really, make sense, but you just have to consider it. And then credibility can take time. We need to be clear and consistent with our actions and honor your promises and build with your teammates. All right. So I'm just stopping here, making sure there's no questions. Like I said, feel free to, if you have questions, you can share them in the chat at any time. Has anyone, I guess I'll ask this, have you guys heard of that DYSIWYG before? I think that seems like I've heard some other people use that before. Have you guys heard that one?
Yeah. Do what you say you would do.
Mm-hmm. That's good. All right. So setting up team norms. So those are an important aspect. I'm guessing some of you guys have probably been in groups where you've done something like this, where you set up team norms. Have you guys, maybe you guys have been through a team building exercise where you've done this? Have people done this before? Or? No, okay. So yeah, so some groups will do this, some teams, I know I've been on a few different teams will do something like this, like a team agreement. So there's different phrases you might use. So this is something sometimes for agile teams will sometimes do this as well. But really the idea here, and this is from a Harvard Business Review article. Like I said, I'll share the information on that later. So if you guys want to look it up, but if you've worked on a few teams at this point in your career, some have worked well together, right? And then others, you're like, that team didn't work so well together. So this, as I mentioned, so it's a 5 steps from this Harvard Business Review article to help kind of set a team together and kind of get to think about. So first, on those good teams, what did success look like? So for instance, there might have been something you did on some of those successful teams you've been on. And that's where this article really wants us to think about, what are some of those things you did that made a team successful? The idea being, let's think about some of those small things, kind of think about, like if we think about personally, we might think about some habits we do, some things we do, like we've talked a little bit about some of those, like clear communication, being transparent, but some of those things you do. And then second, we want to consider what behaviors were part of that and then identify some. So the idea here is not to identify too much, but to come up with a few things that you can help the team focus on. So third, you commit to a few of those. So you might work with the team, have a little discussion about this, And then the idea in this article says focus on 5 or fewer things for the team to focus on. And this is something you can do with the team, work together, and then get them to focus on 5 things or less, a few things that will help the team work together. And then fourth, and this is a key aspect. So some of you might have things like this where people will do something and then they'll put it on a shelf. For instance, like team agreements. I have a story that I remember I was on a team once, and our Scrum Master basically said, okay, let's use this team agreement from the previous team, this other team. We were basically stealing it. And I was like, well, I kind of pointed out that that's not really for us, but to this point in the fourth part here is create a reoccurring plan to check on these. So if you create a team norms or a team agreement, you have to create a plan to kind of check in on those. So maybe it's every once a month or once every couple of weeks to really check in on the plan. So you have these 5 items. Is it working? Maybe there's something on there. For instance, you might have had something that was just too zealous to do. It's not going to work for whatever reason. Maybe take that out and pull in something new. And then finally, and this I think is probably the important thing, the last thing on there, the accountability. So you need to establish some accountability. So what are we going to do when the norms get violated, right? So for instance, Tom here, he breaks one of the team norms. What are we going to do? How are we going to address that? So those are some of the things as a group you kind of need to think about and kind of help your team understand that and help, kind of work together a little better. So Gina says, yep, ground rules. So a few of you haven't used that before, but yeah, it is kind of like ground rules. I think that's a good aspect or a good way to say it. I'm just going to stop. Is there any questions on that? I can maybe try to clear it up, but I can also, like I mentioned, I'll share that link here in a few slides so everybody can see that.
I'm just looking forward to some examples because as you're talking, I'm trying to think of examples in my own head and I'm failing.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the things that, for instance, like we talked about, like communication, or I think earlier when we were talking about teamwork and team player, some people brought up like feedback and things like that. So I think one of those things, and we can all be this way sometimes when you get feedback, right? Sometimes you can be a little defensive, right? We can all, like, if Bob gives me some feedback and I'm kind of like, oh, but maybe that's part of our team norm. So we say, okay, if there's feedback given, let's have maybe some steps to just kind of consider it, not be too defensive. Another thing is transparency or clear communication. For instance, like if maybe they're working on, like a developer is going to release some code. For instance, we might want to say, okay, we need to put a message in the Teams channel or the Slack channel or send an email to certain people. So just so you can kind of think about different things, maybe they're little small things like that, like an email or something, but just so people are aware. And two, even if we do have conflict, maybe think about, because that's something I've heard too, people talk about with maybe in team agreements or team norms, what to do when there is conflict, because there's going to be conflict, right? So think about things, how we can handle that, and kind of be ready. I'm trying. Somebody brought up they worked with a kind of a difficult. I mean, it might have been you, Bob. You talked about a difficult stakeholder, I think, and then that might be something in your team norms. You think about, okay, how are we going to handle? Doesn't have to be a certain person, but maybe there's some difficult personalities or egos we have to deal with. Kind of think about ways to handle that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I just thought of something because it happened to me once. It's, I think, detailing roles and responsibilities within the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember being on a call, a virtual meeting with my teammates, and something came up and somebody said something about updating some documentation or something. And I asked, well, who's supposed to do that? I think I was new. I was within 6 months of being in that role. And
Yeah.
who's supposed to do that? And she goes, you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I am.
Yes.
It was
Yep,
like,
yep.
oh, so yeah, the roles and responsibilities are probably really key because I was quite shocked that was my responsibility
Yeah.
because nobody
And
had
that's,
told me.
yeah, and that's a really good question, Trish, to kind of have those clear, right? If they're clear, then there's not, you weren't, it sounds like you were kind of blindsided, right? By that.
I was very blindsided, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking how many other things they think I'm supposed to be doing that I don't know about.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's, I think, such a big thing is kind of clarity and communication. I think kind of to your point here, Trish, you talk about that, I mean, I've been in a lot of meetings, and I'm guessing kind of to your point, kind of like this, you're in a meeting and you have, 5 people discussing something, but like you mentioned there, it's like, who owns X? Because a lot of times we just, Trish, you might be talking and kind of like we were talking about before too, Tom's multitasking here that I didn't hear it, or I think, oh, so-and-so's got that, or, doesn't apply to me. But that's something I think is so critical when you're in a meeting. Okay, who's got, who's going to do this? Who's going to, update the document? Who's going to, change the code or what, whatever. But yeah, I think that's a good thing. It sounds like that could be something for a team agreement, right? Something to make sure that, or even like outlining action items out of a meeting. It seems like a lot of times you have meetings, they talk about a lot of things, then everybody goes back, and then, a week later, somebody's like, what happened? So, but yeah, I think those are things that could be possibly in a team agreement. What else? Any other miscellaneous duties as assigned? Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a good thing there. As you mentioned, Trish, detailing the roles and responsibilities can be helpful, especially with a team, especially a new team. As Bob mentioned, the forming, norming, or storming and norming. Yep. The Tuckman model. Very good. Yeah. Teams go through that, and these can be helpful things as you kind of establish your norms. So. All right. So as we think about ways to foster vulnerability, this can be something that can be interesting for people. Is showing vulnerability has been thought to be kind of a bad thing with teams a lot of times. For a lot of people can think that anyways. So the idea is that people will think you're weak. So, but in Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code, he shares some refreshing insights. Quote, normally we think about trust and vulnerability the way we think about standing on solid ground and leaping into the unknown. First, we build trust, then we leap. But science is showing us that we've got it backward. Vulnerability doesn't come after trust, it precedes it, unquote. So being vulnerable is better for your team than you thought. Go ahead and ask for help, share some of your mistakes, let them know you're not perfect. So leadership coach Mike Goldman suggests starting meetings with good news about personal and business. Share about personal and professional wins and help lead the connection. So just a simple thing you can do, when your meeting starts. So he calls it the connection startup. So Mike says it helps teams continue to build connection at each meeting. So this is kind of to, I think, the earlier question about, working with virtual teams. I think this is something that Mike Goldman suggests and definitely work for virtual teams. And then also we talk about psychological safety means feeling safe to take interpersonal risks. So to speak up, to disagree openly, to surface such concerns without fear or negative repercussions or pressure to sugarcoat the bad news. One way to encourage this is by actively seeking questions and feedback. Also provide multiple ways to share feedback and questions. So we kind of shared a lot there. Any questions on that? Kind of talking about the vulnerability loop, connection startup, psychological safety. Any questions there? All right. So that's, as I mentioned, the Culture Code. That's another book we mentioned here. So kind of a quick review. We've gone through a lot here and talked about teamwork, being a team player. We discussed influence and credibility. And then we discussed those 5 steps for setting team norms. And then finally, we worked on a little bit on fostering collaboration. So we covered a lot of ground here. So but as we get towards the end, I'm going to take about, I'm going to start a clock here, take about a minute. I want you guys to think about, just do a little quiet reflection and think about these 2 things. Think about any key learnings you have here. And then the action items. Maybe there's something you can apply or something you have here. So feel free. Let's take a minute. I'm going to be quiet and let you guys think on that. All right. Does anybody want to share any key learnings? Bob says it's okay to be vulnerable, not to have all the answers. Very good, Bob. Anybody else? Any key learnings?
Being credible and learning, always learning, so that we are so that we can share things.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing.
And this is Gina. I just have to say, when you touched on the vulnerability, that is so important and so good to hear, because I think a lot of us are and are afraid to admit it, you know, and you know, fear of maybe looking weak or not smart, or, you know, don't know your job real well. But I have to say that a lot of that really in an organization comes from the top and the culture, right? And if they're not modeling that, or you know, what word am I looking for? They're not trying to encourage it. And I'm not talking about mine, but I've been in places, not my current job, but I've been in places like that. And so I guess my point here is it really should be, you know, it should be a culture thing, should be encouraged.
I would agree. I appreciate you sharing that, Gina. That's definitely important. Javier, did you have something to share?
Yeah, I was gonna go ahead and continue on the topic that Gina brought up. That, you know, we're hoping that we're getting that safety or that from leadership that is okay, but also sometimes being a situation where that's lacking, that's not coming, and now falls onto us to sort of, I say drop the hint, but to then be upfront and try to at least put some of those acknowledge that it is okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to have that trust and be able to ask for help.
Yes, definitely, Javier. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So Donna says, Dizwig to build trust and credibility. Yeah. Heather shares being more self-aware, whether I'm open to feedback, if it's a safe place for that feedback. Yeah, very good. So yeah, lots of key learnings there. Very good. I appreciate everyone sharing. Anybody have any action items or things they want to apply? The more trust you gain, the easier it is to ask for help, Steve says. Yep. Very good. Very good. Yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, I think Gina, you mentioned it about the culture and the leadership. That really does play an important impact in how kind of sets the tone, doesn't it? So very good. All right. So as I mentioned, I talked about a few different books there. So you see there, The Ideal Team Player, How to Create Team Norms. Now that's make them stick. That's from HBR. If you do need the link, I can just email me or whatever, connect with me on LinkedIn. I can give that to you. And The Culture Code by Dan Coyle. And then we mentioned too, The Leadership Challenge as well from Barry Posner, James Kouzes. So that's been, I want to say that's in like its 12th or 15th edition or something like that. It's been around for quite a few years. They keep updating it. So with that, and also too, I did put together, so I put this together in an ebook format. If anybody wants to look for that, that is right there. But I think we're done a little bit early, so I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for your time, and I'll hang around here for a few more minutes for if you have any questions, but I will turn it back over to Steve and Bob to close us out.
Thanks, Tom. I'll just speak really quickly, then I'll turn it over to Steve. I know you're probably being modest about promoting yourself, but I can tell everyone on the call, I'm connected with you on LinkedIn, and I know that we have your LinkedIn, URL there, but I would highly encourage everyone on the call to get connected to Tom if you aren't already. Because if you like what you heard today, Tom is an active LinkedIn participant and has a lot of great information. So check that out. And Steve, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up and, for the raffle and whatnot and follow up.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, Tom. We're going to do a quick quiz and then we'll do the raffle. Let me actually stop recording because nobody wants to see all that. Stop recording. Okay.